So, for everybody here, remember 3 minutes. Remind me to hit record. Okay, so up here you've got my contact information. Hey, someone asked me for my YouTube channel, which only has one video on it. It has nothing to do with audio. It has to do with my friend who's a Brazilian trumpet player who works at Arkansas State. So you probably won't want to watch it, but it's fine. But that it's the one that it's like Fundamental Sounds 1867. I don't know how I got that, but that's how it is. I don't care. I think it's kind of cool. 1867. It's easy to remember. I'm putting every effort to put this up on the internet as soon as possible. So I'm recording here and over there and everywhere. So hopefully that'll happen and it'll be there. If you want to see the website or contact me, that QR code will do that. I am always looking for content to do at MAGFest and at other places. And if you have any questions or if you have any thoughts or whatever, just shoot me a line through the contact page. I promise you, I don't keep any of the emails, so like email addresses, I'm not collecting it for nefarious purposes, but I'm just trying to get information for you all so that I can do awesome panels when I come to MAGFest. And everybody always has questions. In fact, this panel is from a question that I got at VGM Con last year, where someone was like, hey, you should tell us how to build a studio. And I was like, okay. And so that's where this came from. So I take the suggestions and they happen. Okay, so there. I'll wait to see if someone will remind me or not. Okay, well, I'm going to hit recording anyway because the first panel I didn't for 15 minutes. So we're just going to hit record and see what happens. Fantastic. I would never get mad. That's just silly. All right, it appears everything is recording, which is great. That's recording. This is recording. Okay, real quick, while we're here waiting for more people, just so you can see, this is actually a demonstration of how to build a recording rig. So I have a Zoom F6 here, which is a portable recorder. I chose it because it has Bluetooth timecode, which allows me to sync with my camera way over there. So when I put this together for YouTube, I don't have to do that like clap thing and like line everything up. It lines it up already. So this has Bluetooth timecode. I don't know of any other ones that do. So that is why I have this one. I have a microphone running into it. That is my preamp. And this is also my interface. So it's pulling, what you're hearing now is a band from Texas A&M University, Kingsville. They're on my label and we did this. This is their Lithology album. It's the jazz combo. It's all students, student composition, student played. It's fantastic. But you're listening to that through my computer, which is also running into the Zoom. And then out of the Zoom is going into the board so that our lovely YouTube people who are MAGFest people can record this. So that's actually an example of building a rig. Right? We have very specific parts that can go together and create something that you can do on the fly. Like this is totally portable. Like I could bring this, like I could podcast with this and it would be fine, right? I chose a very specific microphone for this. It's a super cardioid microphone, so I can get rid of as much bleed as possible. However, I have not listened to my recording of yesterday, so it may not matter. I don't know. But it's my best guess. Because what I didn't want to do was unplug all of their microphones, all right? I didn't want to unplug theirs and plug it into mine and then forget which way they were going and everybody would get mad at me. Now, I might do that tomorrow at my new one because we're doing a panel with Legends of Avantris, which is a Twitch stream of D&D, and I helped build their studio, and we're going to do a thing about why we chose stuff and why they decided to do it. And that's going to be here at 7 o'clock tomorrow. And so I may disconnect all the microphones. We'll see. Okay. But let me, yes. Oh, if this microphone fails, I'll just have to grab that one and throw it up. I can hear through the monitors. the speakers. So if I'm talking and all of a sudden, I also turned down all the other microphones. So if I all of a sudden go, I can't hear me, and you guys, hey, I can't hear you, then I know it all broke. But odds are it won't break. Very rarely do these things break. Granted, I could run out of battery. That's a problem. But so far, I haven't had an issue with that. So let me real quick stop lithology, which is fantastic. All right. So again, my name is Dr. Jonathan Cressy, and I run Fundamental Sounds, which is a audio production company and record label. We do a lot of education. I'm the founder, the owner, whatever you want to call me. I call myself the chief musical officer because everybody's just messing around with the CEO thing. But anyway, my passion is to teach. I'm not a former college professor. I still teach adjunct at Frederick Community College, but my wife got a job in Arkansas, so I went to Arkansas. And I am now in Little Rock, and I run this company instead of teaching in college. But I've been teaching audio production for like 15 years, and I have a ton of experience. So my job is to try to make this as easy for you, because my passion is for us to have better audio in everything. And I want us to maybe not necessarily trust everything. Well, I want to provide you with the information so that you can actually tell whether the guy on YouTube is telling you the truth or not. Okay, because that happens a lot. So today I have it, I made this very ambiguous. Maybe I should have said build a recording studio, but I thought to myself, maybe not everybody wants to build a recording studio, but everybody wants to record. Like everybody here, right, is presently or wants to do some kind of creative content that involves recording audio, correct? Yeah. Yes, okay, so I'm gonna teach you how to build a system and make the decisions that you need in order to do it the best you can at the time, okay? And notice it says, ask me anything. Please raise your hand if you have a question. We won't try not to derail the conversation, don't ask me everything. Just ask me something about recording. But really, I really love it when people ask questions, because I'll answer it. And sometimes we run pretty to the end, and I want to make sure people get time to ask questions. Okay, first thing, these are sort of like the Cressy laws. Okay, the first Cressy law is actually don't be an a-hole. But the second Cressy law is there are no solutions, only trade-offs, okay? This is one of those big things that you get online where everybody says, this is what you need. Well, maybe it's what you need. Maybe it isn't. You don't know, because you've got to figure out what you want to do first. It's also like when someone asks me, how do you record a drum set? I go, it depends, right? How good's your drummer? Are they bad or are they good? If they're good, you can get away with having as little as one microphone. If they're bad, you might need 8, right? You might need drum triggers is what I'm saying here. Like you may just need to replace everything. So it really depends. There aren't formulas for things. There are just foundations and fundamentals that you learn that you can then generalize. Okay, here I'm talking like big educational terms, right? Generalize that information to work on your situation, because everybody's situation is different, right? Your room is different, your mics are different, your how much money you can spend is different, right? So that's important. The other rule, outs always go to ins. I know this is silly and you're gonna laugh, well, maybe you won't laugh, it's not that silly, but it's true and everybody forgets that, right? The out of my mouth goes to the in of the microphone, the out of the microphone goes to the end of the preamp, the out of the preamp goes into the interface, the out of the interface goes to the in of this, and then you got the outs going to there. Got it? Outs always go to ins. You'd be surprised. There's a lot of things that are common sense that you might, like I remember a student once staring at a MIDI interface, not trying to figure out why. He's like, well, I put the out cable and I linked it to the other out part. Like, why isn't it working? Right? They just it was like A goes to A and B goes to B when that's not how it works, right? So you'd be surprised. And also, we're not going to talk about patch bays because none of you need a patch bay. Well, I'm assuming none of you need a patch bay, but if you were to encounter a patch bay, The outs are always on the top and the bottom are always inputs, and you have to know where you're basically plugging things in. So outs going to ins is very, very important. So the first thing is not your budget. Because when you read online, everything always starts out with define your budget, right? Well, okay, like that's important, but at the same time, your budget may preclude you from what you want to do. I don't know. Like if you want to make a AAA video game and you may not have the budget for that. But at the same time, though, you really got to figure out what you want to do, and then you can define your budget by what exactly you need to buy. For instance, okay, what are you doing? Spoken word? How many here are doing spoken word? That would include voiceover acting, audiobooks, podcasting, YouTube. Yay. Okay, great. How many people are doing, I put this in because I went to the synthwave thing last night, which was really cool. And so how many people are doing electronic music? Okay, so you guys don't even need microphones, right? Slash that off the budget. I mean, unless you want to put vocals in your electronics, that's fine too. But in general, right, you're just going to be using synthesizers. Are you doing groups? How many people are recording orchestras? Okay, how many people are recording bands? Couple people, right? You guys need lots of microphones and possibly lots of interface inputs. If you're just recording yourself, how many are just recording yourself? There you go. Some of it's spoken word probably, but some of it is also maybe an instrument, right? Odds are you will only need one microphone input unless you are a pianist, and you will need two, okay? And if you're a drummer, maybe four. So all of those things change what you need. The other thing is, are you doing what I'm doing? Like, do you need to be portable? Do you need to go where your music is being done or where your talent is? Or are people coming to you? That's another big thing. So my career started doing audition tapes for classical musicians. And so I had to go where my musicians were to play, because what's very important for classical music is the room that you're in. So I had to have a fully portable setup, which back in 1997 was a Mackie mixer with a CD recorder and two microphones, and I had to lug it with like a luggage carrier. And now we have a Zoom recorder or a Sound Devices recorder or whatever. Right? So those are the things that you can determine. Like if you're doing a portable setup, like with an orchestra, you just need microphones and maybe a recorder. But if you're doing stuff at home, you could still use this setup, or you could use a computer and all of those other things. Does that make sense when it's like defining what you need before you start thinking about how much you want to spend for things? Because the other part about spending money is everything, as we said before, right? No solutions, only trade-offs. Everything has a trade-off. You don't spend money on your microphone, you better darn well spend it on your interface, or it's going to sound like poop, right? Or if you don't spend on your interface, you better spend on the microphone so that you don't have to put as much gain on the interface so it doesn't sound like poop, right? And what I mean by that is noise. Cheap things are noisy. That is my number one thing. So I work with a group called Global Z Recording Project, and one of the things that they did was they utilized some of my students, and we tested all of these cheap microphones, like down to like people who were making microphones in shotgun shells. Like, it really weird. But like these really, really cheap microphones, because he was thinking, the guy in charge was thinking, well, I want a lot of people to be able to do this, so let's come up with easy ways for people to get into it. And so I have extreme experience listening to some of the cheapest microphones on the market. And every single one of them, the biggest problem was that they were noisy, right? They had a hiss that you could hear. Now, if you're doing spoken word, that could be a problem. If you're recording a drum set, maybe not a problem, because drum sets are really loud, right? Or a trumpet or a trombone or whatever, screaming vocals. The same thing with microphone interfaces. Most interfaces sound fine, right? People get weird into their like, oh, I have a special interface that sounds super awesome. Nowadays, they pretty much all sound the same. However, well, I don't want to say the same. They all sound fine. The problem is their gain. So like, this is a dynamic microphone. This is an SM58. This requires a lot of gain because it's very, very inefficient. And what I mean by gain is you have to turn the preamp all the way up in order to get that to even work. Okay? Yes?
I'm sorry, this kind of stuff aside, but I hate to play really quick because I never...
Okay. No, that's fantastic. So gain, so microphones are what are called transducers. They take acoustic energy and they turn it into electric energy. And that transformation is incredibly inefficient. And so the voltage that comes out of this is like, well, I don't want to know what the voltage is, but the dB that comes out of the back of this microphone is negative 50 decibels. That's really soft, okay? It's like super soft. So what we have to do is we have to use an electronic device called a preamp or an amplifier. We call it a preamp because it happens before everything. But it's an amplifier, and it has like for instance here, it has a knob. I can turn my preamp back up. See how you lost me for a minute and it came back up? And that's because this is so inefficient. That's worse. So what you have to do is sorry, now that I moved my mic preamp. Okay, there, that's good. You have to turn up, you have to add a lot of electricity, a lot of voltage to the output of this microphone in order to make it hearable. And the problem with that is the louder you turn up a preamp, it's kind of like in your car in the volume knob. Like you turn that volume knob all the way up and nothing is playing, you might hear hissing. And that's because the amplifier isn't like top notch. So as you get louder, there's a amount of noise that is put into your recording. So if you're using a dynamic microphone, which are relatively cheap, right? $300 maybe. This is like probably $120. Problem with that is you have to have a relatively powerful preamp that is clean in order to get a good sound, or you're going to hear tss in the background. And that's just because of the mic. Now they're fine, like radio artists use SM7Bs all the time, but they have very powerful preamps that they use to run them. Now you can get a device called a cloud lifter or a FET head or whatever, and what they do when you plug those in, they amplify the signal before it gets to the preamp, and they're supposed to not make anything weird. Like they say it works fine, and it does work fine, but every time I use them, I don't like the way the mic sounds anymore. But doesn't matter. You can get away with it, but that's an added piece of equipment. Okay, but that's what gain is. Yes?
Could you handle hissing with something like noise gate, or is it?
No, because the noise gate would happen. Well, I mean, you could, but it because it's pervasive. Every time you're going to hear it, and then you could use like Isotope RX or some noise reduction software to kill it too, if you wanted, because it's just constant. All right, now we get to the thing that everybody wants to talk about, which is the gear, right? Okay, so here we get into some more fundamentals. The most basic thing about recording is the recording chain. This is the pieces of equipment that you need in order to record anything. So I broke this down to like the most smallest part. So we start out technically, sound comes first, but we're skipping sound, okay, because we don't need to get into that. But the first thing you need is a microphone, and we're going to not talk tons about microphones today, unless you guys want to talk about it, because I can talk about anything for a really long time. The next thing, which we will talk about, is your amplifier, which is what we talked about, the gain, or we also could call that an interface, and I'll show you the difference between the two. The computer, which is really the least important part of this, right? I don't care what digital audio workstation you use. They're all basically the same, right? Like if you like Cubase and you like to like bang your head into walls, then fine, use that. If you want it for free, and I'll put that in air quotes, get Reaper. Don't use Audacity because they track you. If you want to use Pro Tools, go ahead. It's fantastic. I mean, I used to hate it, but now I kind of like it, but it's still really expensive, so whatever. And Logic comes with Max. Logic makes me frustrated. I can't handle it. And for some reason, I can't use GarageBand. I don't know why. Like, you would think I'm a professional. I should be able to use GarageBand, but every time I go into it, I like freeze. It's like a deer in headlights, and I'm like, I don't know where to click. So anything for the media. Now, for the headphones or speakers, Okay? If you have a dedicated space, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, right? I'm about to say something very controversial that will probably get me canceled on the internet, and everybody will put in the comments that I'm an idiot, okay? If you have a dedicated space that you have treated acoustically, go ahead, buy speakers. If you don't buy speakers, okay? Everybody's going to say, oh, there's like a button that you press and it makes it wonderful and all of this stuff now. It's all, yeah, it works. I'm not going to say it's BS. But if you don't have a treated space, spend the money on a good pair of headphones and then use the damn headphones, okay? Everybody told me you can't mix on headphones. And I'm like, really? I've mixed like 12 albums on headphones. They've all won awards. They all sound great and no one knows, except now everybody knows, okay? I didn't have speakers in my studio until like 2007. That's like almost 20, well, that's like 10 years. I used a pair of headphones because no one told me I couldn't, right? And really, that's the best thing for people in your position if you don't have a dedicated space that you are willing to put in some money into acoustic treatment. Just use the headphones. They're going to be costly. I'm not saying using Beats Pros or I tried using AirPod Maxes. They suck for any of this stuff. I wanted it to work. I was like, this is going to be great. And it's not. It's terrible. Yes?
What would you suggest for someone who doesn't own a set of headphones for a good process in which to select a pair for themselves?
Okay, so you're going to want to buy open-backed headphones because open-back headphones they give you the most realistic sound of what something probably would come out in speakers. Now that's the other thing real quick, if I can digress. One of the other reasons you don't necessarily have to mix on speakers is pretty much nobody listens to music on speakers so much anymore, right? Everybody's walking around with either that Bluetooth thing, right? I asked one of my friends today, I was like, when has it become 1980 again and everybody's walking around with boom boxes? Like when I was a kid, like everybody was walking around with their boombox playing music. Now everybody's got like a Bluetooth speaker attached to their back and they're like walking around with their music, like their personal soundtrack. And it's like you're either listening there or you're listening on earbuds or you're listening on headphones, maybe a car, clock radio, but speakers, like people don't do that a lot anymore. Hold on one second. So open-backed headphones. Then what you want to do is you want to get some music that you really know what it sounds like. When I mean like you are so familiar with that music, you can like hum the melodies and you know it in your head, like you can imagine it. And then you go to a place like Gramophone or I don't know if Guitar Center does this, but you go and you try to find places that have headphones. And then you listen to each one and you find out which one to you sounds the most like you know that music is supposed to sound like. The reason I say that is because I used to mix on a pair of Sony MDR 7506s. They're $80 headphones and they're terrible. I mean really terrible, like flat out terrible. And they're tracking headphones that people used to use in like the 70s. And they're terrible. And I made some really damn good music on them. And what's funny is I tell that to students and they're like, I can't do this. I can't hear certain things and all this other stuff. And it really comes down to the fact that I just listened to everything on those things, on those monitors, on those headphones. They were in my iPod. They were in my computer. They were on my cassette deck, my DAT machine, all of those things. I listened to everything on them so that when I was confronted with a piece of music, I knew what it was supposed to sound like. So my brain just shifted. It's just like how recording engineers used to use Yamaha NS10s in their studios, which, by the way, they did that because they were free. Not because they're magic, because they're free. Well, they were free. They're not free anymore. I have a pair. If you want them, you can buy them from me. But they got good. Like, they mixed Michael Jackson records on those things, and they sound terrible. Like, they are bad. They are objectively bad. But they just got used to what things were supposed to sound like, and so you just did it. But open-back headphones are really important because they won't lie to you as much as closed-back headphones. So like Sony has an open back. You're going to, by the way, you are going to pay somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 for this pair of headphones. Okay? That's one of those things you don't want to skimp out on. But that's where it is. Question, you.
Open back headphones
Oh, yes, if you're tracking, okay, I should say that. If you're tracking, buy closed back headphones. But they don't have to be good because you just need to be able to reference it while you're talking. So like if you're doing like a Twitch stream or something and you need headphones, I don't care what headphones you use, it doesn't matter. But if you're gonna mix or produce anything, that's, when you're not on mic, that's when you would use open backed headphones. You're absolutely right, they will bleed. And one more.
I don't think I covered this now or later, like, those phone things that people buy on the
Mm-hmm.
internet?
Well, which phone things? The phone things that go around the microphones or the...
It's like they put it around the room to like,
Yeah,
secure the sound. Do you suggest getting those too?
no. I suggest you going to GIK Acoustics or something like that and buying broadband bass traps. Broadband bass traps. Those other things don't work so well. They basically only cut out the high frequencies, so it'll get rid of some of the slap, but it won't really help for like any kind of real isolation. All right, one more. Yes, back there.
How much do you consider like overage when considering headphones?
Say that one more time.
How much do you consider like how much ohms a headphone is rated for when buying headphones?
Oh, okay. So she asked how much do you consider ohms when buying headphones. So yeah, headphones have different resistances, and I would try to get ones that can be used on numerous systems. So go with the ones that have less. Only because unless you have a dedicated headphone amp, which you can buy and use, then they may be tough to drive on like your computer. And what that does is it means you have to turn, like your volume will just be cut down. When they're higher ohms, the volume gets cut down, and sometimes it mucks with the way it works. That is one thing though, that headphone amplifiers do help. So, that might be something to invest in, is a headphone amplifier, but you can use the one that's built in too. Okay, one more.
This may break the laws of physics, but is there any set of headphones where you could use them wirelessly with no lag?
No.
I thought not.
No.
The lag is probably like less than a second, so maybe it doesn't matter.
Well, it depends on what you're doing. Like if you're like tracking it, heck yeah, it does matter. Like you're talking like 11 milliseconds is 10 feet. So if you're behind by 11 milliseconds, then the people listening are going to think that you're 10 feet away from whatever you're recording with. It's weird. So like you really have to be careful with the delay. So let's move forward real quick. So here's the interface. I'll get to you. Okay. Actually, tell me the question.
Why open back headphones?
Oh, it's just because open back headphones, when you're mixing or producing or mastering or whatever, they provide the best sound stage. So you'll be able to hear where things are panned. And I think of it. When I mix, I think visually, but when you'll hear where things are better, and they mimic sort of the feel of being in a room with speakers, especially if you use a cross-feed amplifier. But like they are the best when it comes to that aspect of things, at least in my experience. All of this, again, is from my experience. Yeah, one more. Yeah. Right. Okay, so closed back headphones are better for tracking because open back headphones, like you can't use the open back headphones in public. Like you can, but everybody will hear what you're hearing because they just spew the sound out the sides of your head. So closed back headphones are if you want privacy and if you want to track, because if you're tracking or if you're doing like a podcast or something and you've got open back headphones, people will hear what you're hearing in the microphone. So they might hear you talk twice because of delay or whatever, and that could be a little weird. So that's why you use closed back for any kind of that stuff. All right, here's the interface. Interfaces are really simple devices. An interface is what it is. It takes the audio and puts it into the computer, because at some point you're going to need to be in a computer because you have to produce this stuff, right? You have to edit it. You have to do whatever you're going to do when you do production. The basic interface is a preamp. Well, let's put it this way. Let's break up the interface into its parts. Okay? So an interface has a microphone or line preamp. We talked about that. It gives gain to your analog stuff. Then you have what is called an A to D converter, which is an analog to digital converter. Those symbols mean nothing. They're just what was in Keynote. I was trying to find something that resembles anything, right? What it does is it converts your analog signal into a digital signal, okay? And Basically, it samples your audio. That will do a quick aside here if you ever want to tip. Okay, if you're doing anything that involves video, you always want to use 48 kilohertz because it's just easier for your programs to sync the video better with the audio. Just use 48. Don't use 96, who cares? Whatever. Just use 48. It's easy. Okay, if you're recording music that will never be in video, then use 44.1. But how many here is ever going to be recording music that's not going to be in a video? It's not going to happen anymore, right? So just record everything in 48. It's just easier because it helps. The bit rate doesn't matter necessarily. So the A to D converter converts the analog signal into digital so your computer then can understand what's going on. The computer is not part of the interface. That's why it's in red. It's separate. Right? You hook it up via USB or USB-C or whatever. And then it comes, like when you're playing out of your computer, you go back into the interface and it converts the digital signal back into an analog signal. And then that goes to an output amplifier that runs either your headphones or your speakers. Okay? That's the simple part of an interface. It just converts your analog to digital and your digital to analog. So real fancy studios have preamps, and then they have dedicated A to D converters that cost thousands of dollars. And then they have dedicated output amplifiers. So like it's very separate, like they could be very boutique about everything. Most of you won't need that, right? And really the interface that you pick is going to be the interface that fits your need. They will all do A to D conversion, and to my ears, which I'm sure are terrible, all A to D conversion pretty much sounds the same to me. Like I have very little, like I don't know, I don't hear it. When people are like, oh, these are great, and I'm like, it sounds the same to me. But it is what it is. So all interfaces do that. It really comes down to how many preamps are in it. Like, do you have 8 preamps? Do you have 4 preamps? Do you have 1 preamp? That's really where your money is going to go. So don't buy an 8 preamp one if you're just doing voiceovers, because there's never going to be a time where you're going to need 8 microphones all at the same time. But if you're doing a podcast that's got a whole bunch of people, you want maybe to get more of those, okay? Or you could use a mixer if you really wanted to, and then have that go into an interface and go. Because a mixer, all a mixer is a bunch of preamps that allow you to mix all of those together to give you 2 outputs or 1 output. That's all a mixer does, right? So you can change, like you could get rid of the preamp and put a mixer in there if you wanted. But most of you won't need mixers because you're not mixing anything. You're just recording one thing. And even for a podcast, record all of them into your digital audio workstation and then mix it then, right? Unless you're Twitch streaming, it really doesn't matter. You can just do it later. So does this make sense as far as like what the interface does? Yeah. So this is an important part. This is one that a lot of people get they get twisted around with. So I'll give you a quick glimpse at what we did with Legends of Avantris. So Legends of Avantris has 7 people doing D&D around a table. 7. That's a lot, okay? So it's a lot of people. So we needed an interface that was 8 microphone preamps, okay? But we had a budget, okay? And we'll talk about, you can ask them about the budget. We had a budget. So I couldn't buy the super fancy interfaces because we needed super fancy microphones. So I called Sweetwater, and my rep at Sweetwater, his name's Patrick Kavanaugh, fantastic guy. Call him up if you want. Super dude. I don't get anything from it, but he's really nice. I like him. Anyway, he's a former student of mine. Anyway, he sent me a bunch of interfaces, and then I listened to each one for the one thing that's important on an interface, a cheap interface. And what is that one important thing? Noise. And I recorded the noise on each one of them, and then I listened to the noise on each one of them, because there's going to be 7 microphone preamps going all at the same time. That means every preamp noise is going to add 3 decibels of noise. Every time you double it, 3 more decibels. So it's going to get louder and louder and louder. So I listened to them, and we ended up picking the Audient interface not because it was the least noisy, it was because it was the most pleasant noise. Because they were all noisy. But that one was like, shh. And I was like, that's okay. It's like white noise, it's fine, right? The PreSonus one was like quieter technically, but it went, it like it was like a pitch. And I was like, oh, I can't, this was gonna drive me insane. Couldn't do that. So they're out. Focusrites were out because their noise is all heck. And then we did, what else? A Mo 2, that was really noisy, but it was okay. But the Audient was just the nicest noise. I couldn't get around it. So that's fine, and it works, and it sounds good, and everything's fine. But sometimes you have to think about it, right? Because everybody tells you, just go buy a Focusrite, right? I really like Focusrite gear, like the old stuff. But the new stuff just is so noisy. And when you turn it up, and you've got like a dynamic microphone, you turn that thing up, you hear it, and it's bad. Yes, back there first. No. Okay, two-part. Oh, my title. Okay, so this is interesting. So I record, right? So I guess I'm an audio engineer. I mix, I master, and I produce. And producing in the sense of I don't write music, but I coach people through the productions. And yeah, so I guess whatever that is. Yes, I guess it would be audio engineer. Yeah.
So the second question is, in case maybe we have a studio somewhere, is there, and we forget something and stuff in here, is there a place where we can call you or somebody else?
Oh yeah, like the.
Bring us to come to the studio and help like perfect?
Yeah, sure.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, I can consult. I've done that all the time. Yeah, so what you would do is at the end there'll be a slide, and you can use the QR code to just contact me via.
I'm gonna forget a few things, so I was like,
Oh yeah, and I'm gonna try to put this up. Like I've been telling people I'm gonna put stuff on YouTube for like 4 years now, 5 years, 6 years. I'm just terrified. Like I just terrified of it. Yes, sir. Oh, the acoustic. Oh, repeat the acoustic stuff. Okay. We'll hold on to that because that'll be towards the end. Okay. One more.
When you record music,
Uh huh.
what type of interface are you using? Are you using the interface usually with preamps, or are you using it?
Oh, all my interfaces have preamps because I just don't want to deal with it.
Are you not using any like analog outboard stuff? Like
Occasionally I use some outboard gear, but it just adds added complexity that I don't necessarily feel is worth the extra time. So I actually recorded an entire album on the Zoom F6 because I had to be in the room with the artist and my computer made too much noise. And so I had to go out really quickly and went on eBay and was like, oh, I just need something that's silent. And so I picked up this thing and I recorded an entire classical album on it. And it was fine. And it sounded fine. And you all know now, but no one knew it before. Like everybody was like, oh, my gear that I use now, because I'm a Mac guy, is I use Metric Halo gear, but that's just because they were incredible. When they first started, they were super flexible. Now everybody does what they do, but like before it was like they were the only ones who would do certain things.
so you're not choosing like interface gear by preamp tone?
Not particularly. I use something. So this is a very good question. So he's asking whether I'm choosing analog gear and preamps for tone. So that is something, right? Every mixer that uses a preamp has a sound. Okay, like Behringer stuff sounds really bad, but like a Mackie stuff sounds okay. It has like a Mackie kind of sound to it. And back in the old days, when I mean the old days, like in the 90s, people made records on consoles. There was no real portable anything, and you needed to be in a studio to do anything, and you would have to use a mixer. And so you had companies like Neve and SSL and Soundcraft and API, and I can name a whole bunch, but they're all really expensive. That's why in the good old days, and I'll say that because everybody had to pay someone like me to record them. In the good old days, you went there because those consoles cost like $100,000 or more, right? Like I know a guy who owns a Duality, which is an SSL console, and it's like $550,000. Okay, crazy. So what people have done is they've taken the bits out of those consoles, so the preamps basically, and they've put them into like little things you could put in your rack, and you can use the preamps. So a Neve tends to sound dark-ish. We'll get into like what dark means, but like it's more thick sounding. SSLs were known for being transparent, but now they're not, because you could only go so far, but they were like very even sounding, and then APIs were very punchy, very mid-rangey. And so depending on where you went to record your music had a particular sound. So like Dave Grohl, right, of Foo Fighters, he owns a Neve console because he bought it from Sound City. I think it's a Neve console. And so his music was recorded on that console. So people will say, well, if you want to sound like the Foo Fighters, then you better record on Neve stuff, right? Nowadays, I'll just be honest, like the digital replication of that stuff, like on UAD plugins or whatever, the plugin, they are so similar that it doesn't matter. The only time I will ever use those is if I'm in a studio that has them readily available, like I don't own any. If they're there, I'll use it, and then I'll just, it'll be a thing. But I kind of like the flexibility where I can make the sound different in the box. Okay, so that's the interface. Big important thing here, and I said this last time, your microphone and your amp are very interdependent. And this is what I've been preaching, right? Cheap microphone, you need a better preamp. Cheap preamp, you need a better microphone. And again, it's all because of noise. That's the big thing. So it's just something to think about when you're making your budget. Like if I have to get a cheaper interface, then I might have to budget for a better microphone. Yes?
So if they're interdependent like that, is it better to lean heavily on one side or kind of split the difference price-wise? Is it okay to have them both mid-range or go high on
There really
one?
isn't a mid-range. Well, I'll just be honest with you. Like either it's cheap or it's expensive. Like there isn't much of a mid-range. Like this microphone is like a set, like if you buy it used, it's like $700. New, it's like $1,100. And that microphone's $120. So there isn't much. And I would think personally, I always invest in the microphones over the interfaces, because interfaces get replaced like every 5 minutes, right? Because it works with a computer, right? What happens when that like I've got interfaces stacked in my studio, old interfaces literally in a pile. Like I have a Motu Traveler interface that I used to use in like the early 2000s that can't even work with a computer anymore, because the software that runs the interface doesn't run on any modern piece of gear. So what am I supposed to do with that? Like I don't want to throw it out because it works, but well, I guess technically it doesn't work, right? So I would go with microphones because they are the most stable investment, right? Like plugins are a terrible investment. Get as few as possible, because when plugins stop working, they stop working hard, right? Like if Waves decides, you know what, we're just going to make this subscription service. I don't care that you've spent $3,000 on plugins. It's just a subscription now. They did that. And it wasn't like, it was basically people calling Sweetwater going, wait, so I just paid for this platinum bundle like yesterday, and now they need a subscription fee? And like everybody got mad, and Wave's like, oh, that was a mistake. We didn't mean to do that. Yeah, they did, right? Because that's just what they do. So plugins are a terrible investment. Interface is less of a good investment. And then microphones are probably the best. That's what I would go with. But again, get what you need. Okay. We don't need to talk about that. DAWs. Okay, DAWs. When people say DAW, they mean digital audio workstation. A digital audio workstation is a computer program that literally mimics the old world. That's what it was made for. So in the old days, we had a console and we had a tape machine. In fact, we had two tape machines. We had a multi-track tape machine that allowed you to record on tracks that would then get connected to channels in a mixer, which then would be mixed together down to a stereo recording usually, which would then go back to a separate recorder. It would be bounced to the separate recorder called a two-track recorder. That was the way you recorded. You went console into the multi-track to track it, Then tracking, you would then play it back into the console to mix it and then bounce it to 2-track. That is the old way of doing things. Let me give you this advice. As much as having analog gear is really cool, don't buy a console. Don't buy a tape machine. Okay? Just don't. Don't. Okay? We clear with this? Don't. Yes?
If I already did.
What if you already did? I'm sorry. I should have done this panel last year. Okay? No, really. Consoles take a ton of expertise to fix. They also are incredibly hot. So if you put them in your studio, you tend to have to leave them on because if you turn them off, it can hurt the circuitry, which means you have to have a dedicated air conditioner to make sure they don't burn up. Okay? And then tape machines, well, there's one place in the United States that you can buy tape. One place. Okay? It's in Pennsylvania. One place. That's it. That goes out of business. You can't use a tape recorder anymore. So just don't. It's cool, but it's don't. And then the other thing is, if you have never made music on a tape recorder, you don't want to. It is a different experience. Like, there's no editing, right? Like, you might edit, like, you'll punch maybe, right? But there's no editing. Like, you can't fix it later, right? You want to change the order of your track, you got to cut the tape because it's all on a piece of tape. So if you're like, hey, I want to change it from track 1 to track 2, you got to take a razor blade, you got to cut it, and then you got to tape it to wherever you want it. It's a pain in the rear end. There's a YouTube video of someone doing it, and at the end, they're just like, this is never going to happen again. Because it's expensive and it's terrible. So we all use digital audio workstations with wrap that up. So the edit window in your digital audio workstation, which I'll show you really quick in a minute, that was like your tape machine. That's where everything gets recorded. And then you had a mixing window, which is where everything gets mixed. The edit window comes before the mixer. Anything that's in that edit window will play into the mixer. That's how it works in 90% of the digital audio workstations. And then, of course, you have inserts, which are like your plugins. Those are all the special things you might want to use to produce your music. Finally, we talked about this a little earlier. Buy headphones. Buy headphones. Buy headphones. Okay, these are Sony headphones that I listen to, and they're nice, and they're about $300. They're the MDR, VR, something or others. They just came out. But they're comfortable, whatever. Buy headphones. Headphones are super important. Yes?
Two big things.
Uh-huh.
Relating to this question, do you prefer we buy wired ones versus wireless ones? And two, are gaming headphones good enough too for the...
Gaming headphones are good enough if you want to just like track or do something, where you're talking in the podcast, where you just need to hear something. Well, I don't want to say that. I've never listened to like a gaming headphone, so I don't know what it sounds like. But I would say if you're going to mix or master or produce anything, you need to get like a professional set of headphones. So either a Sony headphone or Sennheiser HD600s are very good headphones. AKG makes some, but those are the ones that I recommend. The wireless ones, you stay away from the wireless stuff. There is lag and there's no way to get around it. And the only reason I tried the AirPod Maxes is because I'm into Dolby Atmos recording now, and they're like the easiest way without having to pay a lot of money to audition that. Like, just so you know, Dolby Atmos, like if you want to really hear what it sounds like, you've got to have like 11 speakers, and you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of like 50 to 100 grand in speakers, which I don't have. And so like the AirPod Maxes were supposed to be like built to work with Logic, and like so you could hear what like the immersive audio would sound like. Yeah, I mean it worked, it was fine, but they're garbage for anything like as far as like being able to tell what's going on. One last thing here, and this is what we had talked about, the space, right? Isn't that wonderful space? Look, lots of hard surfaces. That's going to sound terrible, okay? It just is. And that's, again, why if you are listening, buy headphones, because then you don't have to worry about it sounding terrible because you won't hear it because you won't be involving it. But if you're recording, your space matters, okay? Most people are in bedrooms, right? That's just the way it is, right? It's 90% of what everybody are in. If it's not a bedroom, it's a room that would be a bedroom if there was a bed in it, okay? So it's a bedroom. And maybe there's no closet, so it can't be a bedroom. Sorry, I just sold a house, so I was like, that can't be a closet. There are a bedroom. There's no closet in it. I'm like, or a window. And I'm like, why does there need to be a window? But whatever. So the way you treat, so this is an example of acoustic treatment. This is actually, the question was like, how do you define treatment? You treat a room. What it means to treat a room is what you're doing is you're eliminating reflections, and you're trying to eliminate what are called room nodes, or basically frequencies that your room promotes. Now, again, this is like a topic that I could spend 5 hours talking about. But basically, every room has dimensions, right? And the best rooms are the rooms that don't have any dimensions that are divisible into one another, okay? I.e. no squares. But the problem is every modern bedroom is like 8 feet by 12 feet, there you go, or whatever, or 6 feet by 8 feet, or whatever. They're divisible, right? They have a common common denominator or whatever. And because of that, it sets up these nodes. Why are they bad? Well, if you're mixing and you have speakers, what they will do is they will either add or subtract frequencies to what you're hearing, okay? That's bad because you might sit there and go, wow, I really like this music, but it needs more bass. And so you jack up the bass so you feel it in your chest. And then you put it in your car and it's like unbelievably loud. Or you put it somewhere else. So the object of producing music is to do what is called translation. You want it to sound, and here, this is another tip. This is what it means, in my opinion, what it means for when music translates. It just means that it sounds good in multiple places. Notice how I didn't say it sounds the same, because it won't. It just sounds good. It just sounds fine, right? How do I know when a mix is done? It sounds fine. Right, no, really, that's how I go. Because if it doesn't sound fine, then something has made me go, that doesn't sound right. And if it doesn't sound right here, it won't sound right anywhere else. So I got to fix the thing that doesn't sound right. But if something sounds fine, like I listen to it and go, oh, okay, yeah, that's good, then it's done. Because nothing is like jumping out at me as like, this sucks, right? It's like, it's fine. So when you translate music, you just want it to sound fine everywhere, or as many places as possible, right? You can't be everywhere. That would be impossible. You can't like go, oh, I wonder what this sounds like in the grocery store. Hey, could you play this? Right? You can't do it. So you have to be in a space that allows you to hear as much as possible so you can pick out the things that don't necessarily sound right. The biggest problem with people in their productions is their equipment that they're listening on, headphones or speakers, are masking an issue that when it goes somewhere else, when that mask drops, they go, wait, what's that? That doesn't sound good, right? And so you want to make sure you're listening to something and rooms are important because a room, if you are mixing in it, can be one of those things that actually affects your sound. I see the hands. I'll get you 1 second. So treating the room when you're tracking helps you get the least noisy, the least, like, you don't want to hear the reflections. You don't want to hear that it's in a room necessarily, because what if your room doesn't sound good, right? If your room sounds great, meaning you go in there and you listen to music and you're like, wow, this is great, like a bathroom. Everybody loves how things sound in a bathroom, right? You're singing in the bathroom, then record in the bathroom. It's great, built-in reverb, everything's fine. But if you don't want that, like if you want the aesthetic of like a radio show, you need to make your room as least reflective as possible. That's where those foam panels come in. The foam panels don't really work great for anything other than really high frequency noise, which is like, you hear that slap back? That foam probably would help that because we have a lot of solid surfaces here. But in general, if you're gonna treat a room, go to like GIK Acoustics. I'm not sponsored. I use them. I like them. They will help walk you through your room. Like you can send them like a photo of your room and dimensions and be like, what do I need? And they'll be like, hey, do this. And that stuff really helps eliminate. And their broadband bass traps will help with that reflectivity. You can also go online and go on YouTube, and there are tutorials on how to build bass traps. I don't know if they work because I don't have any power tools or am I very good at carpentry. So I'd just rather pay someone to have them send it to me. But you can try that and they probably will work. But you need you're going to need them if you're tracking in that room. You can also do it if you're just doing voice. You can isolate the microphone. Now I'm not talking about sticking the microphone in a like a box or whatever, and those like big eyeball looking things and all that stuff. That's just going to make the microphone sound weird. But like, let's say you've got this microphone, right? Put the microphone up, sit in the closet. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sit in the closet. Point the microphone at yourself wherever it sounds best, and then talk out of the closet into the microphone and see how that sounds. You might need to put something behind the microphone. But usually, right, the business end of the microphone is here, right? Not over here. See how you can barely hear it? So why would you put the acoustic treatment out here when the business end is over here? Because you're going to get the reflections from behind you. So you sit in the closet with clothes in it, right? Not without clothes. Like, it's got to be clothes in it. And then you can talk out. I mean, it's close to you. It's not like really far away, right? It's close to you. And odds are you're going to get a more quiet, more intimate sound than you would if you just did it in the room. Okay, so let's start over there. Yes?
I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but when it comes to like the sound files, like MP3 versus a WAV file,
Mm-hmm.
can you hear like the difference between them? And
Yes.
is there ever a need to convert one to the other?
Always use WAV files. Don't use MP3s unless you desperately need to. You might not hear them in the meat of the sound, but you'll hear them in cymbals. Most definitely. They sound like this. MP3s do. So always just use WAV files. We have broadband internet now. The need for MP3s are like very minimal at best. When you're doing production, when you're releasing it, sure, some people want MP4s or whatever. They want their 320 kbps, and we're streaming. But if you're sending it to a streaming service to produce it, to put it up there, you might as well put it as a WAV file. You can hear the difference. It's very, very important. Yes.
So what if it's video? Because you've got a set that you're trying to capture too.
Yes. So that makes it more difficult. So I would incorporate as much acoustic treatment into the set as I possibly can. Putting it behind things like your green screen. You can always hang the green screen on top of the acoustic treatment and no one will know it's there, right? But try to put it in places where either it looks good or you can hide it using other things. But yeah, I get it. It's part of it. Yeah. And the other thing is to use lavalier microphones that get the microphone as close to you as possible, and it's your body is in front of it. You won't get nearly as much reflections. Yes.
More so with recording instruments, would you say it's more beneficial to test out the audio with different interfaces as well, or just mostly with headphones and speakers? Or not?
What do you think?
DAWs.
DAWs. Recording. DAWs are all basically the same. It's not a big deal. Really, it's more about microphones when you're doing instruments, and those you're going to have to test out. But yeah, I think it's fine. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
So this kind of relates to what I was saying earlier with the phone too, but like, what you see those phones that they come before the mic, do you such as those getting those, or those are kind of pointless?
I mean, they work to some extent. The issue really comes in to the fact that, again, the business end is over here. And so what's happening behind you is more important than necessarily what's happening behind the microphone. So when they put things in those, I got someone asked me a question like 2 years ago, and they're like, how come when I put my microphone in one of those, it sounds like the microphone's in a box? And my answer, not being glib, was because the microphone's in a box, right? I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. That's what happened. So it kind of depends on what you feel comfortable trying to adjust in the production phase.
They always sell those things like that, or like I think I got.
Yeah, they don't work.
Shield,
Yeah.
like here.
Yeah, I don't know. They work, but they don't really work.
Like, full is better than behind you. We're just.
In my experience, you're trying to alter what the microphone hears. So you want to make sure that that's what you're altering. Yes, back there. Yep, you, yes.
Sorry. I was going to ask, what does a bass trap look like?
Bass traps. Okay, she asked, what does a bass trap look like? Everybody turn around and look at the back of this room. Bass traps look like that. Those aren't bass traps. That's just a wall between there. But that's what they look like. They're big, thick, rectangle panels. And that's what they are. Yes?
So this is referring back to when you were talking about the recording chain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working with a real piece of shit laptop. It's time for an upgrade. Do you have anything or specifications you're looking for in the computer recording process?
Okay, in general, the only thing about, so he's asking, do I recommend stats for a computer to produce music? Is it music that you're producing? Okay, so it depends on what you're producing. If you're doing just like normal recording stuff, right, with not a ton of effects, no MIDI, then you can basically, I used to record people on MacBook Airs, like the old MacBook Air, one that they pulled out of the envelope, and it was fine. I've never had a problem. However, when you start using MIDI instruments, that takes a ton of processing power. I think if you're a Mac person, then you want to just get whatever the M2 chip is, because it's not worth buying an M1. But you can buy, like I run my whole studio, not my studio, but my mobile rig off a MacBook Air, this one that's here, and there's no problem with it. If it's a Windows machine, then you want, like if you're doing a lot of OBS, Windows is really probably the best way to go with that. I've had really bad problems with Mac OBS. With that, you're going to want something that has a lot of RAM and something that has good straight line clock speed. Like, I know multi-core is like the big thing, but you need something that's got a little bit more single core performance, because a lot of MIDI instruments just don't care about multi-core. They're like, whatever. Like for a long time, Pro Tools didn't even care if you had multiple cores or not. It was just like, we don't care. So that's what I would look for, is just, you're going to spend money on a Windows machine, you're spending money on RAM and on your clock speed. If you're doing a Mac, then you just buy the M2. It doesn't even have to be like an M2 Max Ultra Pro, whatever, because all of that stuff is geared towards video production. So again, if you're doing video production, then you need to get like, the Max or Ultra or whatever. But if you're just doing audio and you don't care if your 15-minute video takes, 7 minutes instead of 6 minutes and 55 seconds to bounce or whatever to render, then just a normal chip is fine. Okay. One real quick, because I got 2 minutes.
In the same vein, I'm looking to build a rig, but most likely I'm going to have to run Linux. Is that
So Linux, Reaper will run on, so your problem with Linux is going to be, will your DAW run on it? And so for Linux, I know Reaper runs on Linux, so that will work. And I think since Reaper runs on Linux, you'll be able to use the plugins like the VSTs and stuff, and it should be fine. But you're going to be limited on DAW. All right, real quick. We didn't get to go over the boring stuff, but the other thing that you have to make sure you do with 1 minute left, you got to buy cables. Cables are expensive. They sneak up on you, okay? I think there's a soldering thing that's going to happen like tomorrow at 10 p.m. If you all are aspiring audio engineers, go to the soldering panel, because building these things is a whole lot cheaper than buying these things, okay? If you're building a big studio, you're going to need a lot of them. Unfortunately, I won't be able to tell you sort of what it is, but balanced are like these mic cables. The thing about balanced and unbalanced cables, which I'll show you real quick. Why is it doing that? I just don't care. Okay, that's all wrong. I don't know why it's doing this. Okay, balanced cables can go really long distances. Unbalanced cables can go 6 feet before they incur noise because of radio stations, okay? Because it's basically a really big, long wire. So you're picking up all of this radio frequency. So if you're going more than 6 feet with an unbalanced cable, which is like RCA, a guitar cable, those are going to pick up noise. And if you're using it as a mic and you turn up that preamp, you're going to hear that noise, okay? You got to use balanced cables, which have shields that prevent that noise, okay? So I am out of time, but I'm happy while I'm packing up. Please come to the next panel tomorrow if you're interested in learning more about this and how an actual group decided to spend the money. And if you want to use that, that will bring you straight to the contact page on my website, and that will allow you to ask any questions that you want. If you want me to help you with your studio, go right ahead. That's what Legends of Avantris did. So thank you, and I'm here if you want to talk about stuff. Thanks.